before you ask, yes, I'm drunk. Very drunk. And I've had a swig of poppy juice. It helps with the pain. And you want to know something funny? If you're drunk and drugged, no one notices you're dying. They think I'm a wastrel. Talking whispers. They think I don't know what's going on. I do know. I know she despises me for my weakness. And I know about the books. They've all had a book published. But I was published 5 years before them. She dismissed my work. It was only published in newspapers, as though that somehow denigrates my brilliance. And make no mistake, I am the brilliant Brontë. Their first book of poems sold 2 copies. 2 copies! And she sneers at my poems being published in newspapers. More people will ever read my poems than will read hers. She didn't invite me to have my poems published with theirs. She was afraid that mine would stand out as the jewels amongst the pathetic fake stones of their childish words. Oh, but her superiority now that the wretched Jane Eyre has been published is sickening. She says, I could not tell Branwell of my efforts for fear of causing him too deep a pang of remorse for his own time misspent and talents misapplied. But Eyre loudly telling everyone else. I have to be a stone statue not to know. I hear her trilling. My father says it's the best novel ever to have been written. As if he'd ever say that. I was the one my father favoured. He knew I had more talent than all of my sisters. I could write and paint. Oh yes, my father recognised my creative talent. He found the money to send me to the Royal Academy School. And that was my dream, to be a portrait painter. Poor father. He scraped together enough money and off I went to London. I never saw the Royal Academy and the money soon slipped through my fingers. And I had many riotous drinking sessions until there was nothing left. I slunk home with a good story to explain the loss of Reddy's and I started a new career as a tutor. I was the best tutor anyone could have wished for. Too good for those boys. You wouldn't have known me. I was calm, sedate, sober, abstemious, patient, mild-hearted and a paragon of virtue. It was unfortunate that the serving wench got herself with child and I was dismissed. Oh, my sisters didn't hear about my indiscretion. They'd have been shocked. Virgins all of them and not a notion of the needs of men. But don't be downhearted for me. A glittering future awaited me. I became assistant clerk in charge at Sowerby Bridge Station. The pay wasn't so good, but there was the possibility of promotion, and it was only 4 miles from Halifax. Halifax was the hub of literature and music, and it pulled me and embraced me. And I got free travel. Charlotte, of course, made fun of my new role and was horribly sarcastic about the adventurous qualities of my astounding appointment. She failed to mention that she had no job of her own at this time. I loved my new role. It was hardly onerous, and I was able to write and leave my post for other pleasures, and I was soon promoted to clerk in charge. Charlotte was her usual unpleasant self and sneered at me, saying it was a strange job for an artist. Silly woman. I had long since given up my hopes of a career in paint. I was now a poet of great brilliance. She dismissed my poetry as she dismissed me. I was the troublesome brother that she despised. Now, what right had she to despise me? I was the source of all the creativity in the house. I was the one who made up the stories and created the characters. I was the catalyst of every idea that was let loose in the minds of those three sisters. And there I was, with perfect job, able to do whatever I liked, and she couldn't say a good word about me. Not one word! Yes, I know. I agree it was unfortunate there was an audit of the station and I was dismissed for £11, 1 shilling and 7 pence. But being back at home suited me. See, this is when I became truly great, and the newspapers were clamouring for my words. My poems were published one after the other. I embraced the literary world, and I wrote many letters to famous poets enclosing my work. I was greatly encouraged by the replies. They recognised my genius, but strangely I did not get any further. I was disappointed and needed brandy to help me through. No one knew. I was clever and crafty, and I hid the bottles around the house. It was easy because the house was quiet. Anne was working away as a governess, and Charlotte and Emily went off to Belgium to learn French. I don't know how much French they learned, but my silly sister learned all about desire. She yearned and sighed and doted on poor Monsieur Reguer, who was greatly embarrassed by her devotion and had no interest in it whatsoever. Oh, he admired her intellect, but certainly not a plain little person. Then tragedy struck our family. Oh, we were used to tragedy. We'd lost our mother at a very young age and then 2 beloved sisters. We were mothered by Aunt Bramwell, who I adored. She died in agony, and I was very much distressed. I was even more distressed to find out that she left all her money to my sisters. She thought that my genius was such I would never be in need. I had no other recourse but to find a means of employment. Fortunately, my sister Anne was a governess and the family needed a tutor for their son, and so I took the job. And then my torments began in earnest. And to begin with, all was well. I was the favourite of the household, and I curled my hair and scented my handkerchief like a squire. And then I fell in love. I was besotted with my beloved Lydia. Lydia encouraged my poetic efforts, and I had 4 poems in a new outlet, the Yorkshire Gazette. Life was joyous. My talent was at its peak, and I was appreciated by my beautiful lady. I knew such happiness, and then I was dismissed from my post. Mr. Robinson not only didn't appreciate my poetic output, but he was enraged by my affair with his wife. I crawled back to Haworth, and Mr. Robinson threatened to shoot me if I ever went near the family again. My father was furious. He called my beautiful Mrs. Robinson a diabolical seducer. He wronged Lydia. I was the one at fault. My suffering brought on further dissipation. I had no income and brandy was beyond my reach. I had to settle for gin. Anne was back at Haworth as well, and she left for reasons of her own. So now we were all together again, and the three sisters sat around the table writing their appalling novels and whispering about their brilliance. I started writing my own novel. It was about a young man who is cruelly treated and rejected by his beloved. He's a man full of jealousy, passion and rage. He seeks revenge on all who have wronged him. I called him Heathcliff. I didn't finish the book, I abandoned it. Emily found it and asked to read it. I didn't care what happened to it. Now, how could I write when my sorrow at losing my Lydia was such that only gin seemed to help? I was careful to hide my drinking from the family. I had them all fooled into thinking I was getting over my loss. It was careless of me to knock over the oil lamp and set my bed on fire. Fortunately, Anne saw the smoke and she and Emily dragged me from the bed. Otherwise, I would have burned to death and I would have been grateful for the release from my torment. Then, the most wondrous thing happened that catapulted me out of my stupor. Mr. Robinson died. My Lydia was a widow. I had reason to hope that ere very long I should be the husband of a lady whom I loved best in the world. My hopes were dashed. The unfeeling Mr. Robinson had altered his will, stipulating that his widow would be left penniless if she reopened communication with me. And for some reason, this persuaded her that our love was impossible. The idea of Lydia suffering with want for me and the thought we would be parted forever was the low point of my life. I need oblivion, and thank God for drink and drugs to help me. And I'm dying. I know this because the pain is getting so much worse. I embrace death as a means to escape my mental torment. I've lost Lydia, and I have no interest in living. Oh, what have I got left? A family who think I'm ruined? They no longer have any good feelings for me. They don't understand me. I have to steal out of the house while they're all at church and beg for opium. If they cared for me, they would give me what I need. I've always disliked Charlotte, but now I hate Emily, and I'm indifferent to Anne. Anne, a silly little governess who has written a book about a silly little governess. No, I haven't read it. I haven't read any of them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction gloating over their published books. How wonderful it must be to hold your published work. I can now face up to the failure my life has been. I was felled like a tree in the forest by a sudden and strong wind, to rise no more. I was a genius with so many gifts, and I threw it all away. But you know the worst thing about all this? It's not the missed chances, the artistic career drunk away. It's not the writing career that should have been mine. It's not the great love that evaded me. It's the fact that I'll always be known as their brother. when I should have been known as the brilliant Brontë. The Brontë, the only Brontë. I lost the race and never ran.
Bramwell died last night. Bramwell, my dear brother, so clever, so talented, so tormented. And now it is I that am the tormented one. There was something I needed to tell him, but now it's too late. I did try. I tried many times. I'd go into his room and shut the door so we could have a private conversation. I thought it out and I'd formed the words in my head. But he always said the same. Give me some money for gin. And I always did. He needed it so badly and I couldn't refuse him. Don't think too badly of me. No coward heart is mine. I did try, one last time. I said to him, Branwell, you must listen to me. And he said, I don't want to listen to you. You've broken my heart. Give me a shilling for gin. And that was the last time I spoke to him. And I was past all pain. I often think of death. We are surrounded by death. We lost our mother and 2 sisters and Aunt Bramwell who brought us up. I should find this house sad and morbid. But I don't. I love my home in a passionate way, a spiritual way. I become ill if I'm away from home for any length of time. I never want to leave home. Even when I'm dead, I shall lie in the graveyard, close to everything I crave. I shall be there soon. I hide it from my family, but I know what the pain in my chest means. I've seen so much of death that I'm not afraid. I shall lie in the graveyard and I will not leave again. The first time I was sent away, I was 6 years old. We were sent to the school of the Daughters of Clergy, and it was very harsh and strict. I was always cold and hungry, and I missed my home. Oh, Charlotte wrote about the school in Jane Eyre, and now I don't know whether my memories are from her pen or in my mind. I am sure I remember the dreadful food and how grease would float on the top of every dish. It made me sick. But there was no sympathy. Our elder sister Maria became ill, and her symptoms were ignored. Eventually they sent a letter to Father and he came and fetched her home. She died 6 weeks later. And then Elizabeth became very ill. She was sent home. Father had no forewarning. When he saw how ill Elizabeth was, he came and fetched Charlotte and me, for he feared for our lives. Oh, the joy I felt in escaping from the clergy daughters' school and coming home. But poor Father, he lost 2 daughters in a matter of months. And Elizabeth's funeral was misery. When that coffin and the velvet pall descended and descended slowly into the horrid clay, I can feel the voiceless gasp, the sickening chill with which I hid my whitened face. Branwell wrote that. I could drown in his words. Father never sent us away to school again. We were taught at home by him and Aunt Branwell, and I took to wandering the moors, which gave me a spiritual peace. I would take a book and walk for miles till I found a secluded bower, and then I'd sit and read for hours. It was my escape. I often found a stray dog and brought him home, or an injured bird that I nursed back to health. I always had a little menagerie because I found the animal world to be unjudgmental. I've never known an animal look at my plain face and comment on my lack of beauty. I needed to escape the harshness of the present, and writing was my saviour. We all wrote as children. It began when Branwell got a box of toy soldiers as a gift, and we invented an imaginary world called Angria. Now, Anne and I were very close, so we invented our own world called Gondel. I do not use the word imaginary, because Gondel was real to me. We created a romantic hero, Julius Brenside, and his two lovers, Rosaline and Geraldina. Oh, Julius was very fierce and unreliable and had people in prison and executed. He was succeeded by his daughter, Augusta Geraldine Almeida, and she took many lovers. I lived with them all. They were part of my life. No, they were my world. If only that time could have lasted forever, but no. Cruel life intruded, and to go away again. It was decided that Charlotte would be a teacher at Roe Head School and I would be a pupil. I didn't want to go. When would I have time for my Gondel fantasies? Here, I had lessons and household tasks, but apart from that, my time was my own. I could escape to Gondel whenever I wanted. But there, I had no one to share my world. My imagination was deprived of Gondel. I needed quiet. I needed peace. I needed Anne. I spent my time surrounded by loud, boisterous and unimaginative girls. Charlotte called them fat-headed oafs. Well, I would not have been so unkind, so all I could do was just withdraw into myself and try and find time alone. Out the window, I could see the moorland hills, and they reminded me of my moors. Every morning when I woke, the vision of home and the moors would rush in on me, darkening and saddening the day before me. I became so ill that Charlotte feared for my life. She said I should be sent home, and Father agreed. Oh, I had to work. It was impressed on me that we needed the money. But we decided to try and start our own school. But for that we needed experience in education, so with reluctance, I became a teacher at Law Hill School in Halifax. I'm ashamed to tell you I loathed every minute. It was hard labour from 6 in the morning until nearly 11 at night, and I only had half an hour to myself to write poetry. A little while, a little while. The weary task is put away, and I can sing and I can smile alike while I have holiday. The only joy was the school dog, and I preferred that to the pupils. Teaching was drudgery, and my health broke down, so I had to go home again. And I sincerely hoped I would never leave. Oh. So how did I let Charlotte persuade me to go to Belgium with her? Oh. I was told in sharp tones I needed to improve my French and German if I needed to be a good teacher. So I went to Belgium. And I did become competent at French and German, and I can play the piano fairly well. But Charlotte embarrassed me by her moaning and sighing over poor Monsieur Eyre. She fell in love with her teacher, and her esteem and respect for him developed into an unhealthy obsession. I was almost glad when Aunt Branwell died and we had to return home. Oh, dear Aunt Branwell. She'd left us £350 each, so we could start our own school. We so wanted to be independent and earn our own money. But we failed to attract a single pupil to the remote area. Our hopes were dashed. I vowed I would never leave Haworth again, and I never did, and I never will. Once I was home, I started collating my own poetry. I had one notebook for Gondel and one notebook for untitled poems. Charlotte discovered them and read them. I was very angry. They were part of my private world. I felt defiled that other eyes had read them. But Charlotte wanted to publish our work. It turned out she'd been writing poetry too, and then Anne admitted she had too. I allowed myself to agree to our work being published, but using pseudonyms, male pseudonyms, because we thought they wouldn't publish us if they knew we were women. So the book was a resounding failure. Only a few copies sold. But Charlotte, undaunted, she started writing again another book called The Professor. And she sent it out to publisher after publisher, and they refused it, and she started writing again. And then Anne did too. I felt I should be writing too, but couldn't think what to write about, so I made myself useful doing the household tasks, and while I was clearing out Branwell's room, I discovered some notes he'd made for a novel he was writing. The main character was called Heathcliff. Well, it's only a few notes, nothing more, but Heathcliff moved into my mind and stoked my imagination. Gondel was gone, and I was full of stories and ideas about Heathcliff. He dominated me, and suddenly I was writing. The novel poured from me, and I wrote and wrote. Anne said she had written her book too, so we decided to get it published together. We used our male pseudonyms, and when it was published, we waited patiently for the verdict. I wanted to tell Branwell what I'd done. I wanted to acknowledge his contribution, but I knew I had to, and I did try. But then the reviews came out. Then I couldn't tell him. I will never write again. My soul was burnt by the spite in those reviews. Here, we have all the faults of Jane Eyre magnified 1,000-fold, and our only consolation in reflecting upon them is that it will never be generally read. It is a coarse, disagreeable story. Coarse, wild, confused, disjointed and improbable. There were some kind words said, but it's the harsh, insensitive ones that seared themselves in my mind. How could I tell Bramwell those unkind words about a character he had created? The last words he said to me were, "You've broken my heart," before asking for the gin money. No, Bramwell, I've not broken your heart. You've broken it. And in breaking it, you have broken mine.
Oh, do stop coughing, Anne. You're getting on my nerves. I'm trying to write.
I am sorry, Charlotte. I do apologise, but I'm unable to help it.
You must help it. How many sisters have we now lost due to their incessant coughing?
Maria, Elizabeth and Emily. I make it 3.
So selfish of them to die and leave us to manage. It's fortunate I'm a renowned author and can afford to keep us all.
But Charlotte, I help. Agnes Grey is doing very well. It's outselling Wuthering Heights.
No one likes Wuthering Heights. That dreadful wife-beating Heathcliff. The reviews were awful.
They weren't all awful. Some were quite encouraging.
Oh yes, they were. The one I particularly liked was, "We arise from the perusal of Wuthering Heights as if we'd come fresh from the pest house. Read Jane Eyre is our advice, but burn Wuthering Heights."
Emily was crushed by some of the reviews. How odd it is that we so often weep for each other's distresses when we shed not a tear for our own.
Yes, it was a shame. She might have done better with her second novel. I could have helped. I would have been prepared to help and advise her on how to write a best-selling book.
The reviews weren't all good for Jane Eyre. Everyone moves on stilts. The opinions are bad. The notions are absurd and the foundation of the story is bad. The characters are ill-drawn and the feelings false and unnatural.
That is the result of a feeble sort of spite. There were some excellent reviews of my book. George Henry Lewis said the representation of the governess was not only accurate, but accurate in being a representation of her views. He praises the realism of the book, says it's the great characteristic. Of course, I broke new ground. I wrote about a plain heroine. All heroines are supposed to be beautiful, but Jane describes herself as poor, obscure, plain and little.
I think you'll find I wrote Agnes Grey first, and I was the first person to portray a plain heroine. Agnes gazes forlornly into her mirror and can discover no beauty in those marked features. You must have copied me when you wrote Jane Eyre.
Copied you? Well, let's take a look at the reviews for Agnes Grey, shall we?
No, please don't.
Oh yes, here we are. The heroine is a sort of younger sister to Jane Eyre, but inferior to her in every way. And I seem to remember the words coarseness and vulgar being used.
I've learned a lot since then. This novel is going to get some good reviews. I've nearly finished it.
No, it won't. The critics will hate it. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is a sordid tale of a sordid man with a sordid addiction. I don't want it spoken of in my presence again. I can't think where you get such depraved ideas from.
It's based on Branwell.
Never let him be spoken of in my presence again.
But he was our brother.
He's dead now. Let's forget him.
I can't forget him.
Oh, obviously we're now going to enter a mawkish episode where we remember our drug-ridden alcoholic brother.
Dada thought he was more talented than any of us.
That's because he was the only boy. Dad had doted on him, but even he became appalled at his outlandish and drunken behaviour. He had no right to be born. He sought to fasten his feebleness onto some other person's strength. That's the way he lived, begging for money that he had no way of giving back. Poor Dada, he was so disappointed. But I'm his favourite now.
He always loved Branwell. He was proud of him, not towards the end, but when he was younger he thought he was a genius. Branwell could do anything. Look how well he painted.
I can paint.
He was going to be a professional artist.
He couldn't stay sober long enough to pick up the brushes.
But he could paint. Do you remember the lifelike portrait he did of all of us with him in the middle?
Yes, and I told him to paint himself out. He was no longer fit to be our brother. Now there's the three of us, and he's the pillar. He painted himself out and painted a pillar in his stead. Mind, better a pillar than the depraved monster he became.
His poems were very good. He could write.
He was never published.
But he was in newspapers.
He never wrote a book. He never held a book in his hand and said, I wrote that.
He could have done. He had the talent. Charlotte, you have to admit. He could write.
And commit adultery.
Can we help where we love? It was unfortunate.
As was the laudanum.
He was depressed when Mrs. Robinson didn't love him anymore. He needed oblivion.
I don't wish his name to be mentioned again.
Why not? You understand love. Monsieur Eyre. You loved him. It wasn't just for his intellect. He was married. Or have you forgotten that you craved a married man?
I don't wish for his name to be spoken of again.
Listen to what I just written. I imagine there must be very, very few men in the world that I should like to marry. And of those few, it's 10 to 1 I may never be acquainted with one. Or, if I should, it's 20 to 1 that he would not happen to be single or take a fancy to me.
You must cross it out immediately. People might think you're referring to me.
No, they won't. No one outside the family will ever know about Monsieur Eyre. And no one knows how moonstruck you are over George Smith.
George Smith? I don't wish for his name to be mentioned again.
We'll have to speak of him.
We don't have to speak of him.
So if I want to speak of the publisher of your book, I have to say the unmentionable man.
You can refer to him as that unpleasant man who doesn't think I'm good-looking enough to be of interest to him due to my plain face, lack of teeth, gauche and countrified ways, and unfashionable and clumsy clothing.
Or we could simply call him the publisher.
I no longer consider him to be a marriage prospect.
If he can't see your superior qualities, then he doesn't deserve you. Beauty is attractive to the worst kinds of men, and therefore likely to entail a great deal of trouble on the possessor.
I've never had to concern myself with beauty. I accept my plain looks. I have great intellect, though, and that should have been enough for him. And now he's had the temerity to become engaged to someone else.
Oh, Charlotte, I am sorry. You should do the right thing, though. You must write and congratulate him at once.
Indeed I must. I shall choose my words very carefully.
You always do.
He doesn't deserve to be my publisher anymore.
He's a very good publisher.
He pays me half of what he pays his male authors.
You should ask for the same.
And my book is better.
When you send him your new book,
The title is Shirley.
ask for more money.
I will. It's very good. Listen to this. If men could see us as we truly are, they would be a little amazed. But the cleverest, The acutest men are under an illusion about women. They do not read them in their true light. They misapprehend them both for good and evil. Their good woman is some queer thing, half doll, half angel. Their bad woman almost always a fiend.
How true that is. You have such a way with words.
I thank God for the gift. It lets me look after Dada, and we shall never have to worry about money again.
Perhaps, now that we're both earning, and Emily's book is also bringing in a little, we could get some help in the house.
Why would we want that? Tabby can manage.
Oh, Charlotte, she really can't. She's got a bad back and bad legs. And today, she's blacked the grates and lighted the fires, cleaned 3 pairs of boots and fed the birds, cleaned away and washed up the breakfast, washed up the scullery and cleaned the knives, swept the front hall and shook the mat, swept the stairs, passage and cellars, cleaned the front step and the flags on her knees and the front door and the scraper. I've peeled the vegetables, made the beds, tidied the bedrooms, cleaned the bedroom floors, washed the ewers and basin, tidied the kitchen table and hearth, and taken Flossie for a walk.
What a nuisance Emily died. She could have taken the dog out for you.
She loved animals. She was always petting him and letting in strays. Do you remember the time she petted the stray that came to the door and it bit her? She immediately ran to the fire and seared her hot flesh with a red hot poker, fearing it was rabid.
Yes, she loved dogs. Keeper does nothing but whine and pine for her.
We all pine for her.
I do my best not to. I've a book to write. It is a pity that doing one's best does not always answer. Do make sure that door knocker's polished. I noticed a dullness about it yesterday.
You could always help. We could share out the chores.
I have to write books. I need to look after Dada.
Why don't you marry Mr. Nichols? Then he could help you both.
Dada would never let me throw myself away on a mere curate. I'm a best-selling author. Arthur Nichols would never be my Mr. Rochester. I shall wait for the right man to come along.
But Charlotte, we don't meet many men. We spend our lives writing.
To make money?
Our first book didn't.
Yes, that was strange. It was very good. Poems by Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell. Doesn't that sound impressive?
Impressive or not, it only sold 2 copies.
Yes, you think all of our friends might have bought it?
Perhaps they did.
I've got more than 2 friends. There's Mary and Ellen and...
Mrs. Gaskell?
Hardly a friend. An inferior sort of writer.
I think she's quite a good writer.
Did she write Jane Eyre?
No.
Then I rest my case.
There are other good books. Take my Agnes Grey.
I'd rather not. It's an inferior Brontë.
It sold very well.
It is in no way as accomplished as Jane Eyre. Dada says Jane Eyre is the best novel ever written.
By a Brontë.
Is there anyone else? The Brontë name is a bright shining star in the cosmos of book writing.
Yes, and the Brontë name applies to Emily and me.
Mine are outer planets. The glowing nucleus is me.
Perhaps I should give up.
Oh no, Anne. Your book brings in a little income. Besides, it gives the readers a comparison. Inferior Brontë, superior Brontë.
Some people think Wuthering Heights is the best Brontë book.
How misguided of them. Dada says it's Jane Eyre, and that'll be an end to it.
Dada's worried about the future.
There's no need to be. I'll look after him, and you can help.
But Charlotte, has it occurred to you that we might not be able to?
Of course we'll be able to. Dada needs looking after. His eyesight's so poor now. He needs help.
But Charlotte, you know I have a cough.
Then we'll get you medicine.
What if the medicine doesn't help?
I'll take you to Scarborough. The sea air will do you good.
Oh, I love Scarborough. I used to go there every year with the Robinsons.
It's a pity you left the Robinsons.
Yes, I like the girls. They still write to me. I made a success of that job. It was hard at first, but I won him over.
It was impossible for you to stay. Such a shame. The income would have been handy. Branwell has a lot to answer for.
Charlotte, can you take me there soon?
Where?
Scarborough.
I don't see why not. Do you think you need to go soon?
Yes, Charlotte. I think I need to go soon.
Oh, Anne.
Yes, sir. I've got the pain in my chest. Like Maria, like Elizabeth, like Emily. It's my turn next.
We'll take you to Scarborough. I've heard it's a lovely place to recuperate. Ozone's what you need. Fill your lungs with it. You'll be better in no time.
I'll just finish my book and then we'll go.
Of course, there's Dada to consider. I'll have to ask Mr. Nichols to look after Dada.
He will do. He's very kind-hearted. You should marry him. He loves you.
I don't love him. I've known true love in my life and he falls short.
Do you mean Monsieur again?
He is a possibility. I might put him in a novel one day.
Do you still love him?
Love is real, the most lasting, the sweetest and bitterest thing we know. Of course, you understand that, Anne. I know how you felt about William.
How do you know I never told anyone?
It was obvious. Every time he came to the house, you blushed.
Oh no.
And when he took a church service, you never missed it. You'd sit there in the front row and your eyes never left his face. Anyone could tell how you felt about him.
He didn't feel anything for me. A piece of me died when he died. I will not mourn thee, lovely one, though thou art torn away. 'Tis said that if the morning sun arise with dazzling ray, and shed a bright and burning beam athwart the glittering main, ere noon shall fade that laughing gleam, engulfed in clouds and rain. Perhaps it was meant that my darling William died, because it left a vacancy for Mr. Nichols to fill. Charlotte, you should think about marrying him. It's obviously God's plan for you. I can see it all now. I lost William, so you could gain Mr. Nichols.
Hardly again. The parishioners hate him.
He wouldn't let them hang their washing out in the cemetery. I can understand why they're upset. It's not like it's going to bother the occupants, is it? They're not going to be concerned about undergarments flapping about. They have to hang their washing somewhere.
I agree with him. It's not seemly. Besides, I don't want to see people's drawers from my window.
That's good.
What's good?
You, sticking up for him. You do like him.
I don't like him. He looks like an ox. And Dada has said he doesn't want me to marry anyone.
Think of this possibility. You might not be around much longer. Your health has always been poor.
My health was ruined at that appalling school when I was young.
Maria and Elizabeth died.
Yes, leaving me as the eldest to take responsibility for keeping this family fed and comfortable. And now I have to look after Dada.
That's so unfair. I help. Don't pretend like it's all on you.
But you're ill now. How long can I rely on you?
Exactly. You should marry Mr. Nichols and let him help you.
I already turned him down.
He asked you to marry him? Oh, good. I knew he would. Charlotte, this is the way forward. You should marry him. God has decreed this. When did he ask you?
Last Wednesday. It was shaking from head to toe. The presumption that I would marry him.
Did you tell Dada? Did he ask Dada's permission?
Yes, Dada was apoplectic. The vein on his head stood out like whipcord, and his eyes went bloodshot when he learned of the proposal. The curate asking to marry me. Me, one of the country's most accomplished authors. Dad had confided in Ellen that he didn't want me to marry anyone. I've heard Mr. Nichols has applied to become a missionary in Australia. And Dada says there's not enough gold ore in the outback diggings to qualify Nichols as a husband for me. And now he's gone on hunger strike. He thinks he'll win me by fainting every time he sees me.
Oh, Charlotte, I really would think again.
Why, I don't want him. Dada doesn't want him. And I ask you, in what sense is that young man worthy of me?
I can answer that. Dada needs him. He can't run the parish without him. He's practically blind, and you know that Mr. Nichols does more than he should. He keeps this parish going. If Dada can't run the parish, we'll lose this house.
No. We can't lose this house. Emily loved this house. She couldn't bear to be away from this house.
We all love this house. But if Dada gives up the parish, we'll have to go somewhere else.
Dada won't want to go anywhere else. He won't find his way around. His eyesight's so poor now, he couldn't move to anywhere new. Oh, he'd be so unhappy. And I don't want to leave this house. This is our home. Our childhood memories are here. Branwell and his soldiers, our angriest stories. Do you remember when we wrote them together?
Of course.
Branwell and I were such a team. Such imagination. He oozed ideas. They poured out of him. And you and Emily with your Gondel stories. Our past was to be our future. We can't leave this house.
Then he'll have to marry Mr. Nichols.
Can't you marry him?
I won't be around much longer. It'll have to be you.
I'll have to sacrifice myself for this family.
Yes, I think you'll have to.
To save the family home, where we've all been so happy together.
Yes.
I've written an excellent play in heroine.
And now you must be one.
For Emily, and you, and me.
Yes, the Brontë sisters.
The value of sisters' affections. There's nothing like it in the world. For the three of us, I will do it.
And for Branwell.
Yes, and for Branwell. Reader, I married him.